give your opinion on the Bills and the NFL. Let's talk football live. Now, here's the 13 Wham Sports Team.
Welcome into Let's Talk Football Live. Mike Catalana, Dan Fates with a Veterans Night Off. I'm Jenna Cottrell. We are breaking down the season, a final little wrap-up as we look ahead to the 2021 offseason. We know the Bills, they finished their season in the AFC Championship, Mike, 15-4 on the year. I don't think a lot of people expected that going into this season, but now to be where they're at, where is this team at now?
Look, they're good. They're one of the best teams in the NFL. And the farther away we get from the disappointment of what we saw in that championship game, I think the more you'll appreciate just how good this team was. I was on a radio show today and we got talking about it, and you can focus, and we will a little bit, on what they need to do to get that next step. But when you go back to a year ago when they were in Houston and left that field, we knew they were a good team. Yeah. But the improvement they made in a year was staggering. I mean, they scored over 500 points this year.
Insane.
And they, we talked about it a lot, Jenna. They met expectations and exceeded them. They kept doing the things that we didn't know they could do. Where no Tom Brady there or Tom Brady, they beat the Patriots.
Yeah.
They won on the road. They won primetime games. They won in the playoffs. Like, they did all those things. And would it be great if they would have won another one and gotten to the Super Bowl? Sure. But they were pretty good, and that's impressive, I would say, for where they were a year ago.
Yeah, and Dave brings up a good point. They are the AFC East champions of 2020. And I know that was something that now looking back, you're like, oh, yeah, I kind of forgot that. But when we think of what Brandon Beane said before the season even started, he came out and said, we need to win the division. And he was very clear about that. And do you remember Sean McDermott, before the season started, a reporter asked, what keeps you up at night? And he said Josh Allen's development. Like, that was going to be the biggest question mark coming into this year. And to see how much we've seen Allen take those steps, to have Stephon Diggs have an all-pro season. Like, it is incredible what I'm seeing kind of online, because I think a lot of people have that taste in their mouth of on Sunday. But the hindsight of being like, wow, this team definitely made some steps forward. But Mike, and we all know, I mean, the Chiefs are a formidable opponent as any. Like, I feel like we look at them and we say, oh, crap, like, are they going to be the Patriots?
Well, it's funny you referenced what keeps me up at night about McDermott saying that about his quarterback. And then right before the game, he was talking about how the Chiefs offense keeps him up at night. Because they're that good. Yeah. I mean, they really are that good. I would say going into this season, you were thinking the Bills were a playoff team trying to prove they could win a division. And by the year ending, they were the second best team in the AFC. And quite possibly the second best team in the NFL this year. Yeah. I mean, I thought Green Bay was pretty good, and then they got beaten by Tampa. And I think Tampa, they have Brady and all that. They're good, but I don't think anybody would have thought of them as the best team in the NFL. Kansas City's the best team. The Bills this year were right behind them. Yeah. And I think that's impressive, but they still got a ways to go. In fact, you know what? We were talking about it. Let's hear McDermott. This is what he said in his news conference the other day.
Here's what I know from experience. If you sit here and say, all we need to do is do this much more to make it to the Super Bowl, you're wrong. You got to start over. I mean, yes, you carry a lot of things forward, but every year you got to start over. You got to rebuild the football team. You got to grow as an individual. I mean, you've got to take it upon yourself, just because we had success, to ask yourself the hard questions. Because to think, well, we won 15 games and lost 4. Well, we're perfect. No, we're not. And even if we were, you got to take the growth mindset approach. And so that's what you do when you're a winner. That's what you do when you're hungry to be the best. And that's what we're going to continue to do. As long as I'm the head coach here, you got to do that.
Yeah.
And
here's what I know from experience.
Sorry about that. He was trying to get Sean. He kept wanting to say the same thing.
and Chris brings up the comment, like, what does that mean when he says we need to start all over? What is that, the continuity?
Yeah. I think he's making I don't think he's making a strategic point. I think he's making a mindset point, as in, yes, you won, you were good. That's in the past. Like, there are coaches, and I've heard Belichick say it, you're not the defending champ when you've won, because it's a different team coming back the next year, and you got to prove it again. And that is a mindset. It's like, hey, we're the Bills. We made the AFC Championship game. Well, they don't just place you in the playoffs next year.
Yeah.
Right? You got to win, and you've got to find a way to get back where you were. And I made the analogy yesterday about the golf tournament. Like, you're right in there at the end on the final round. That's great. But the next tournament starts with the first round again. And you got to get up on that leaderboard again. And then when you get there, after all those shots, just like all these games, you get back to a moment like we had Sunday night, and you want to be able to do it. And they didn't do it in their first try. You know, maybe that'll help them in a second try.
And I think sometimes we forget a piece of this, especially like a lot of these, we don't know how many guys are going to be coming back. I think the Bills have about 16 free agents. It's guys like Matt Milano and John Brown, John Feliciano, that are starters and helped contribute to this team. So with the salary cap situation, the way that it is too, it's like, are they going to be able to find players that can make as much of an impact as those guys that we've seen be reliable for this team? And it also reminds me of, you know, the first year Mcdermott came in here with Beane, they made the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then that next year, because they were taking care of the cap situation, they didn't have as much talent on the team. We saw how much the team kind of regressed in that manner. They missed the playoffs. And then for them to kind of build things back up. So I think a piece of it is just remembering that while a core of these guys are coming back, you're going to have Josh Allen and Deion Dawkins and Tremaine Edmonds and Trey White and those types of guys. It's not going to be exactly the same.
No,
because of that, there is that added element of like, how will things come together?
Yeah. And, you know, all these players are at, you know, they do have a young core, which is good. Bob's right. You know, the reduced salary cap will have a major decision impact on decisions. And he talked about that a lot yesterday. But, you know, the cap's going to affect a lot of teams. And in different ways. The plus for the Bills is their core is really good. But, you know, I say that about not everybody's in the same spot. Like Jerry Hughes was their most effective pass rusher, and he's their oldest or one of their oldest players. Yeah. Micah Hyde, and Beane said, I didn't see a drop-off at all. But Micah Hyde's he's certainly closer to the end than the beginning of his career. He's still really good. Yeah. But, like, Micah Hyde's going, like, I've been to this championship game. I want to get to the Super Bowl. Like Josh Allen, he's a quarterback. He could play for 15 years. Not everybody can do that. So guys are at different places. Cole Beasley's been around a little while. Yeah. And we talked about it a lot yesterday. A guy like John Brown, I think they're going to move on from. And he's not in the list of free agents because he does have a year left on his contract. But I think the way it plays out, they're going to need to make some of those moves that may seem in the short term to bring the team back. But in the big picture, and maybe even for next year, it could end up being a positive.
Yeah. I will say the one thing I think Bills fans need to revel in is the fact that they have the quarterback.
Yeah.
And we see around the league, like today, the reports about Deshaun Watson and how he requested a trade out of Houston. Now we know they hired their head coach. It seems like, I mean, this has been the talk for the last couple of weeks a bit about his unhappiness with the Texans wanting to find a new team. That's a guy that's obviously immensely talented. And we know the Texans didn't have a great season, but it was not because of Deshaun. And now you think of, well, where could he go? And Mike, I mean, there was links to the Jets and to the Dolphins. Yeah. It's like, we were talking about this earlier. It's hard to think of, most teams are like, we want to go after him. But the fact that the Bills don't need to says so much about where this team is going as opposed to where they've been.
I mean, it's a huge plus to have your guy. Look, it's nice to know that a guy like, let's say nice, some team's going to end up with him. There's many, many, many reasons why the Texans should not trade Deshaun Watson, but they're going to do it anyhow. Yeah. And they've put themselves in this corner. And you could say the salary cap reasons. You could say you don't trade a franchise quarterback. I don't think the Houston Texans are a well-run organization. Mm-hmm. They have a GM that I think has alienated some people already. They have an owner that's alienated. What did they say? They have marginalized their franchise quarterback. Like they have put him in a spot where he's done with the organization. And David Culley is a man who was with the Bills a few years. He has a nice resume. He's one of those lifer guys in the NFL. But he's 65, and you name him as the head coach, and he's never been a head coach or a coordinator. It doesn't mean he's not a good guy to come in because they need that. But I don't think that's keeping Deshaun Watson around. So somebody is going to end up with him. And wouldn't it be something, Jenna, if it's in the AFC East and we're seeing him twice a year with the Jets and the Dolphins, or the Dolphins?
Well, I mean, you've witnessed what it's like to have another powerhouse team in the division. I'm not talking about the Patriots when the Bills weren't able to contend with them, but obviously Miami.
It was great. It's the reason the Bills are still in the AFC East because, Bills fans will know there was a time when the league was making changes with the expansion teams and the Bills could have moved to another division. And Ralph Wilson didn't want that to happen because he loved the Miami rivalry. I think because he had a house in Florida too, and he liked going down there. But he loved the rivalry, and it was a huge rivalry. I mean, back in the 70s, it wasn't because the Dolphins beat them 20-some straight times. But then it became one because it was Kelly and Marino. And it's Kelly and Marino 2, sometimes 3 times a year. And it was great. And then you still had John Elway. And in the NFC, you had Joe Montana. And then eventually, you had Troy Aikman and those quarterbacks. Like, you had to be the best, you had to beat the best. And the Bills in the AFC were the best. And they beat all those guys, the AFC guys. So it was fun. It'll make the road tougher.
Yeah.
I mean, Sam Darnold's potentially a nice player, and Tua looks like he has ability, but it's Deshaun Watson here if they make that deal.
Yeah. And we know it's someone that's beating the Bills in the playoffs. What did Brandon Beane have to say? Because we want to get to that as well.
Well, it was a great question.
I asked it.
No, it was an hour into his news conference, and I think he was tired of talking about, how he's going to fix the running backs and pass rush and everything else. So I asked him about the quarterbacks and having a guy like Jenna mentioned, but also the uncertainty around the whole league.
Yeah, good question, Mike. It has been interesting to see some of the turmoil, around the league at that position, and guys may be moving. We'll see, but hopefully they're not moving to our division, the ones that we think are really good. But at the end of the day, we won't be able to control that. And to your point, excited at what we have in number 17 and where that's going, and really appreciative of how hard he's worked since we selected him, back in 2018, and just looking forward to what he's going to do this offseason and what he's going to look like in 2021.
All right, wait. I have to go back. You kept in the Mike, nice question. Mike, great question.
Well, I did that. Well, hold on. Let me make sure.
Yeah, good question, Mike.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah, good question, Mike.
Yeah, I mean.
Does everyone see what I put up with?
No. What he said was, then the question becomes, how about signing Josh Allen? I think they have a plan to get that done. I think it will get done. And there's ways to make that work for the cap that doesn't impact the cap this year. They push things off. I get all that they can do. They want to sign Josh Allen. It is kind of funny that you look for different reasons around the league. Well, yeah, that is true. They got 6 draft picks. You need to make sure you hit on them because they're going to want those guys to contribute. They did pretty well in the draft contributions this year. I mean, Tyler Bass was great, and Gabe Davis did really well.
And Panessa, we saw kind of at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think he'll have a bigger role. He'll certainly have a bigger role next year. But I was thinking about big contracts for the quarterbacks. Watson just signed his, he wants out.
Yeah.
Wentz signed his, they want him out, or some do.
Yeah.
Jared Goff may be in the same spot, just signed his. And so quickly, it's turns on those guys. I'm not saying that's happening with Josh Allen, but it might give a team pause to say, do we want to do this now? Do we want to wait another year? Do we want to see how it goes? I think if you're Josh he's in a position to get it done, but he's only in the 4th year. And they could, I mean, think about what they could do. They exercise his 5th-year option. So that's this year, next year, and then they have the franchise tag. Like,
yeah,
let's look at what Dallas is doing with Dak, even though he didn't have that 5th-year option as he wasn't a first-round pick. So, yeah, they have options there. But the Watson thing is real, and he's going somewhere. And you got to hope, seriously, you got to hope as a Bills fan, not only out of division, get him out of the conconference. Send him to Chicago, send him to the NFC, send him to the Giants, like wherever he goes.
Yeah.
Because he's a real deal. Like he's a great player.
Yeah. Triggs brings up the point too. Like we have Isaiah Hodgins, who I think a lot of people forgot about just based on the fact that he had the injury, was put on IR and kind of put to the back burner to get healthy this season. But I mean, we hear from Brandon Beane, and there's so much talk about, you heard Sean McDermott say it earlier, like we have to start over. Mike, I mean, just in terms of pressure with not just for Brandon Beane, but GMs across the league, like here they are, the salary cap is down. That's going to affect re-signing guys. Pro days are going to be held at schools. It's going to be virtual, basically. It's going to rely, some guys didn't play this past season. Like how much harder does their job now get? Because the access is so much more limited than what we're used to.
Yeah. I mean, some teams handled it better than others. I think, we may look back on this past year with some of the strange things that happened and think it was a bit of an aberration. Like, I watched the Miami Heat now play, and they've had all kinds of COVID issues. And last year they loved the bubble. They were great in the bubble, and it worked for them. And this year they're a losing team. I know it's a different sport, but it's like people were projecting the Miami Heat like 3 years out. And I'm like, let's see how they are in the post-bubble world of the NBA, where now you're traveling and doing those things. So I think it is going to be interesting. I will say for the Bills, that continuity is important because, especially with the coaching staff. I mean, I'm still stunned to think everybody's back. I mean, they've talked about Dorsey, the possibility that but most teams have already hired their coordinators, and so I would say right now it looks pretty good that that the Bills are keeping their key people on the coaching staff, for another year, which I think with the quarterback. Many people, look, Stephon Diggs wasn't around and look at the way he played this year. Yeah. So it can happen, but they had a good core. They had all that going for them to begin with. So yeah, it is. And as far as the cap goes, these guys have been thinking a year or two out when they were planning things. Well, no one expects the NFL to ever take a step back money-wise. They print money in this league.
Exactly.
So it's a pretty big shock that this year. But while the Bills have issues, I think some other teams have bigger issues. Yeah. Oh, somebody who just wrote that. So what about Star Latulele? I think they fully. Yeah, here it is. Yeah. I think they fully expect Star to be back next year.
Yeah, I think you saw some of the struggles in the run game without him. There was always that, like, what if he were to play this past season?
Well, he's the type of player that they really did not have.
Yes.
It doesn't mean he's a superstar, but they didn't have anybody, and they got handled that way a lot this year.
Well, let's take a look too, because we did a poll earlier on about what people would like to see the Bills address throughout this offseason, and what they were thinking. Biggest needs for 2021. And pass rush, 47.9%, not too far behind the run game. But the pass rush is something that, we've talked about. I mean, Jerry Hughes has been the best in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback. And I don't think anyone really expected that. But I think a lot of people, just from reading the room, have felt some frustrations with Ed Oliver. And do you think that's warranted?
It's tough to tell. Some guys, it takes a little while to become. We've seen him be very impactful in moments.
Yes.
But it's a tough game there on the inside. I know there are times he's doubled. I don't think he's double teamed all the time. But I do think your line becomes a lot better when there's someone that scares people. Okay, you look at Washington's D-line. Chase Young scares people. Now, it's hard to get a Chase Young, but he scares people. That makes their whole defensive line better. And I made the comparison to the wide receiver group. As good as John Brown and Cole Beasley were, man, when you add Stephon Diggs, everybody else becomes so much more dangerous.
Yep.
Because you're like, oh boy, what are we doing with Diggs? And I don't think they have a player on that line that scares people. And I don't know if they find one in the draft. You know, sometimes teams find a guy and you're like, why did this guy last to the second round? Or maybe that's what they'll do late in the first round. Yeah. You know, find a pass rusher. I don't know.
Well, we know they tried that this past season with AJ and Panessa. And that's not to say that he wouldn't, continue to grow. But I always think to what, we've heard Beane and Sean say about we want a guy that can scare people. He even said it about the tight end position, about Travis Kelce. And obviously Travis Kelce is a beast and there's no one really like him, but having someone like that draws your attention and changes the way that you plan for the game. Let's go to some of the comments though, because people had other comments about it. Running back, this team needs its Thurman Thomas. Offense wins in today's NFL, so I value being able to run the ball more as it will always take pressure off of Allen.
It would be nice to have Thurman back, yeah.
Thurman would be a good addition, yeah. Allen cannot be the best running back on the team. His career will get cut short. I think that's a valuable point because we know he's taken some hits. They need the biggest, meanest pass rusher in the league.
Mean.
Steal people's lunch money. That's what that sounds like to me.
Well, I always use this line. I had a defensive line coach say to me that on my D line, I want guys who are this close to getting arrested. Now, that takes on a whole different meaning in 2021. And this was a long time ago. But I know what he meant. He really didn't mean that. He meant a streak in them. And the great ones do, where they're like, it's not about being arrested. It's just they don't care. They're going to embarrass you. They're going to find a way. I mean, Bruce Smith was unblockable when he played. He was just unblockable. When he'd get going, you had to double him. He could wreck your game plan. Having a guy like that is great. They need more of that, though. And it'll be interesting if Milano is gone, what role they then find for Tremaine Edmonds. I guess I'm going to fall back on this again. I always have said I thought Tremaine would be an effective pass rusher, and yet he's never really used in that. And maybe they see it. Obviously, they see it differently. I know.
Well, I guess a part of me also wonders, we've seen how well Tremaine plays with Milano.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if Milano, were to go somewhere else, because a lot of times you can make so much more money if you were to leave, but I just think of that and wonder, we don't see him really in that role as much.
No. And, I guess I would just say that. I would say, why doesn't this team use Edmonds more as a pass rusher?
Yeah, good question, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wonder why they don't. And Brandon obviously agrees with me.
You are so annoying. Someone writing in which
wait a minute, hold on. Lone Wolf Edmonds is a terrible pass rusher. Oh no, I'm sorry, that was the wrong one. Here it is. This thing. Wait a minute. Allen was good against Indy.
I'll put it up there. There we go.
Man, everything is flying by. We're getting a lot of comments.
You're getting old, Mike.
Yeah, no kidding. This is interesting what Charity says.
Wait.
Oh, how did that happen?
Okay, I'll put it.
I think we saw a lot out of AJ Klein this year. I'm not saying he's Milano, but
I didn't mean to highlight that clip.
But I say I like a lot of what AJ Klein brings to them. I think AJ Klein plays with a little bit of anger. Yeah. Which is good. I mean, he's a good tackler.
He's got that chip on his shoulder.
But he's not Milano. Milano can run. But, man, when Brandon was going through the injuries, Brandon Beane, and you highlighted in the story you did for us, the litany of injuries. The guy's tough, but, your best ability is your availability.
I mean, hamstring issues in terms of that ankle, broke his leg, concussion. Yeah, the pec injury that put him on IR this year.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And I don't know if that's his style of play and just using that physicality.
A little bad luck too. He's had a little bit of that. I mean, I remember when he got hurt in that Jets game, it was right at the end, right before the Jets scored to win the game, and he got hurt. I mean, that was a tough way to go out for the year. But okay, Christopher Green here. Let me see.
We're highlighting the same thing.
Okay, there it is. Okay, so Zach Ertz, if the price is right, obviously I've followed Zach Ertz through his career. He's a really good player. He would absolutely fit the culture with the Bills. He's towards the end of his career, but he can still catch the ball. He is not Travis Kelce. He's not breaking tackles and running down the field, but he gets open. He gets in those zones. He's good in the red zone. He's a very good pass catcher. Boy, ATN is a spectacular back out of Clemson.
Yeah.
And again, look at what the Chiefs did at the end of the first round. They took
Clyde
Edwards-Helaire. Yeah. And those kind of players, as talented as they are, could fall to late in the first round because teams don't like to take backs early because you see what happens with the Cowboys and the Giants. As good as those guys are, that's a lot of money to pay a running back. But you get them late in the first round, it is something. Yeah, okay. Seriously. The bully.
Mike's not bullying me. He's just being Mike. No, I agree. I mean, we'll see in terms of, I remember last year, like we talked about in the mock drafts, I wanted them to pick a running back with that first pick in the second round. Obviously, they waited till later on. Does Mike really have yes, Mike does have the button. For
what does that guy know? What is that guy, Stephen Bond?
Wow. Hi, Stephen Bond.
It's like 3 hours earlier.
He's smart.
Yeah.
That's true.
Is it
over there?
Aren't you supposed to be working with the referees? Conrad Dobler types now, 115. You're going back. I mean, Conrad Dobler was when I was like a kid, and that was like 5 years ago. No, Conrad Dobler played for the Cardinals. He did commercials, and he was a mean offensive lineman. Like he was known for like biting players. Like he was crazy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, back in the 70s of the NFL. So but I think they could use a little bit of that. I think John Feliciano's got a little bit of that. That came out in the playoff game.
Yeah. I definitely think you can see that.
Yeah.
Also, I loved when Josh threw the ball at the guy's helmet. I was all about that. I know we talked about that. But.
Hey, look, the Chiefs played physical, and they were pushing the Bills around early, and I think that was a part of the plan. And they got away with a lot of it. They had the one penalty, but they got away with a lot of it, and they took command. Eating kneecaps from Scott Blakely.
No.
Dan Campbell with his idiotic news conference.
What was that?
Oh,
also, if we're talking about, can I just say, and this is not a hot take, but I am so sick of seeing the Patrick Mahomes, Rodgers rate commercials. Like if Josh Allen goes out and does a commercial next year, I hope it's as funny as Baker Mayfield.
What would Josh? I keep trying to think of this. First of all, they're all doing insurance commercials. Baker's are much funnier.
Yes.
Rodgers is funnier than Mahomes. Mahomes is playing second fiddle to Rodgers.
Yeah.
With Rodgers' ego, if they flip that around a little bit, I don't think he'll like it.
Yeah.
But I don't know what Josh would be doing them for. I think it's going to be something.
So I actually had someone tweet at me because a couple weeks ago at a press conference, Stephon Diggs said he called Josh Allen the general. And people were saying he should do the general insurance commercial.
Go to the general and save some time.
Like Shaq does them, I'm pretty sure. Seems like a bit of a downgrade compared to State Farm. Who knows, though? But, yeah, I thought lights went out on the Mayfield commercials.
I kind of like the Mayfield commercials.
Oh, I think they're fun. I like them, too. I think they're funny. He's a really good actor.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Now, he's been chirping back at some Browns fans who've been saying the Browns should go after Deshaun Watson. Hey, Baker had a good year. He ain't Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. No. I mean, we talked about this earlier on today, before we were doing the show, of like naming what teams wouldn't want.
It's a quick list.
Yeah.
I would say when you go in the NFC, that wouldn't want it. Now, some teams are sort of precluded from it based on certain things, but the whole NFC East would want Deshaun Watson. If you look at the North, Green Bay, no. Everybody else, yes, right? Detroit, Chicago, and Minnesota, would want him. The South, New Orleans would want him now.
Yep.
Carolina would want him. Atlanta, again, they have Matt Ryan, but if they could make that move, they would want him. And Tampa, when they got Brady. So again, they're precluded from it. A year from now or 2 years from now, they would want to do it. And in the West, the Rams would want him. Arizona is really interesting. I don't think they would because they've got everything set up, but he ain't Deshaun Watson either. No. San Francisco definitely would want him. Seattle, no. Seattle, no. The Bills, no. Yeah. Everybody else in the division, yes.
It's crazy.
The Steelers would. I tell you what, they were working it out with Ben. But if they thought they could get Deshaun Watson, they would go to Ben. Cleveland won't. I mean, they do like Mayfield. They're not doing Cincinnati would not. I mean, they like their guy. And Baltimore would not right now, certainly, with their quarterback. Tennessee's interesting. They like Tannehill. Jacksonville's going to take the number one guy. I mean, there's very few who, the Chargers would not. The Chiefs would not.
Yeah.
The Raiders would. The Broncos would. I mean, you're talking about, at this moment, I would say 20 of the teams will be calling the Texans to see what they need to offer.
Yeah. And you can get a haul for him. Like, I'm curious what that deal will end up being because you have so many teams interested and the talent and what he would bring to the field. What are you reading?
I'm reading what this comment was. Do you remember the Jets playoff game in the 80s? It was 9-6 Bills. Yes. Hammered fans tore down the goalpost. Yes, that was 3 field goals for the Bills. They won the division that year, got into the playoffs. Yeah, 9-6 game. I remember Fred Smirlis in that game. I think the Bills blocked a field goal late. Man, that's going back. That's going back in the day. The old school Bills. What are you laughing at now?
No, I just was thinking of you pontificating about the past. People. This was nice. Elijah saying, thank you for covering the Bills this season. Greatly appreciated. We always appreciate the kindness. And we'll have plenty of stuff going on this offseason. We're going to do some mock drafts, pre-draft stuff to get ready and taking a look at, the Bills. They have some decisions to make, though, because someone was a comment saying Najee about draft picks and stuff. The Bills drafted running backs back-to-back years under Brandon Beane, both in the 3rd round. What do you do? Because how adding someone like that, a talent like that on offense could help open up the offense, help alleviate some of that pressure on Josh. But it's also, I feel like to Beane, it says, we've struggled at this position to draft well or draft to what our expectations are.
It is funny because you start looking at it and you go, okay, you've got 2 backs that I think are kind of similar. And I don't think, Beane was defensive of both guys, said, I don't think it's our running backs. He may be right. Mm-hmm. Maybe in a different setting with a different type of offense, they would excel more. But I think they're too similar. And I don't think they're giving the Bills other options. When TJ Yeldon plays and you don't notice a difference, and TJ Yeldon's a veteran, he's tough. He was really good in pass protection, at least anecdotally. I looked for a few plays and I was like, man, Yeldon lit up the guy coming in because Allen was under a lot of pressure Sunday. Yes. But you need to see more out of a back. And I do think they need a guy who is a nightmare matchup in the slot, who you can get out in pass plays, who maybe has more speed, more top end speed. And, a guy like Travis Etienne, he's that type of guy that could change things. Then I think you move on from one of the other backs because there's only so many carries. And I think if they do that, the guy they would move on from is Singletary. He's a year older, a year closer to a contract. Like when I say move on, do you deal a guy like Devin Singletary? You're not getting a lot for him. Yeah. You're getting he's part of a deal. I knock something over here. He's part of a deal on a draft day where you trade him and, to move from the, up in the 4th round or something. I mean, it just is. He's a running back and, he's a decent player.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's going to be part of when they look to upgrade. They're going to look to upgrade tight end, and they're going to look to upgrade the run game.
Yeah.
Or at least getting the ball in the hands of running backs who can make more plays.
So many decisions this year of like what they're going to be able to do with the draft, with just the checkbook opening up, and Brandon Beane talking about the salary cap and how, again, like you said, it's like you would expect the NFL to print money. Obviously, this is times that no one was expecting. And Brandon Beane even said that. He's like, yeah, I mean, I wish I could have known some of the contracts that I did. We would be in this situation. Obviously, no one could do that.
Right.
But at the same point, it does make it interesting because I feel like this team has come out of those cap issues under Brandon Beane. They've done such a great job of trying to get back on track. Yeah. And we'll see how that affects.
Well, and like, a lot of people wonder, could you make deals? And, Beane talked about that. He's like, I wouldn't expect anything. Look, the deal he made last year was fantastic. The best trade in the NFL. But he was taking on salary and a higher priced player for draft picks. Mm-hmm. So that's hard to do this year. I would say to Brandon, like, can you do it again?
Yeah, good question, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see if he can come up with a deal in order to bring in the right kind of players and help this team.
I feel like you're just going to clip that. We're going to hear that a lot, I feel like.
Now, I will say this. I ran that soundbite on the newscast today, but I did not include the gratuitous
edited it just to have it for here tonight.
Well, it was the longer version that I wanted to have just so our viewers here would be able to experience his entire answer. And the fact that it included him complimenting my question, the fact that he did, I mean, it happens a lot, but, I'll put it to you this way. By the end of that, he was just looking for a good question.
Oh, you're terrible.
Well, there was some not good questions.
Okay. We have gone over on our time. We're going to wrap up here. We'll have plenty more coverage coming up. Dan Fates will be joining us later on. He's has a veteran day off.
Oh, this is, Dan's enjoying his time off with the family, but man, we talked running game. Oh, it's driving him nuts. Wait till he watches this back.
He must know. He's getting messages. He's tapped into us. It's hi Charity, a nice shout out. Amen, Mike. All right, we're gonna wrap up here, but we appreciate everyone watching.
Let me just add one other thing. Also up in the corner, Connors and Ferris, Greg Connors and Company, our sponsor. We thank them. Great sponsor all year long. We hope this relationship continues with other stuff, but huge Bills fan who is really hopeful that everybody in Rochester can be, or Buffalo can be at training camp this summer. We're waiting to see like everybody else. But shout out to Greg for and him being part of our show every Thursday during the season.
Really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun this year, so we appreciate you guys all tuning in. We appreciate Greg Connors and Ferris. All right, for Mike Catalana and his not great question, I'm Jenna Cottrell. We will see you later on BuffaloPlus.com. Oh, just be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We appreciate it. Thanks, guys.